the Aztecs story, they were just the lost tribe. They were the last brothers to come in.
What really happened to the people who lived in Mexico before the Aztecs? The thing nobody tells you is that while history books mention conquest, new DNA evidence reveals a far darker story. This is the secret Graham Hancock has been trying to expose, the true identity of the Aztec Empire. It's a truth buried in the bones of the vanished, a genetic blueprint of conquest so complete, it's like entire civilizations were erased from existence. We're about to uncover what scientists found, and it points to a level of manipulation that changes everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. The Bone Key. Many people are crazy about ancient mysteries. An archaeologist digging through the ruins of an ancient Aztec city might find pottery, jewelry, or even some golden artifacts. But none of these treasures can tell the whole story quite like a tiny fragment of bone can. That's exactly what happened when scientists got their hands on ancient DNA samples from Aztec sites across Mexico. For decades, historians have been scratching their heads about the true origins of the Aztec people. The traditional story goes something like this. A nomadic tribe called the Mexica wandered south from a mythical homeland called Aztlan, eventually settling in the Valley of Mexico around the year 1300. They built their magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan, on an island in Lake Texcoco and went on to create one of the most powerful empires in the Americas. But here's where things get interesting. When modern geneticists started analyzing DNA from ancient Aztec remains, they didn't find what they expected. Instead of a simple story of migration and empire building, they uncovered evidence of something much more complex and, frankly, much more disturbing. The breakthrough came when researchers managed to extract mitochondrial DNA from bones found in Tlatelolco, the twin city of Tenochtitlan. Mitochondrial DNA is like a genetic passport that gets passed down through the maternal line, giving us incredible insights into ancient population movements. What they discovered was mind-blowing. The genetic signatures didn't match the neat, tidy origin story that had been taught in textbooks for generations. Instead, they revealed a web of conquests and what can only be described as genetic replacement on a massive scale. And you can see this everywhere once you start looking. Now here's where our story takes a dark turn. There was a beautiful lake city named Xaltocan. It turns out this place holds one of the most chilling genetic mysteries in Mesoamerican history. Before the Aztecs came to power, Xaltocan was the thriving capital of the Otomi people. These weren't just some small village dwellers. We're talking about a sophisticated civilization with their own language, culture, and political system. They had been living in the Valley of Mexico for centuries. Then the Aztecs showed up. What happened next has puzzled historians for generations. One day, the Otomi people were there, living their lives. Then, seemingly overnight, they vanished from the historical record. Gone. For years, researchers had two main theories about what happened to these missing people. The first theory was that they peacefully assimilated with the Aztecs, intermarried, and became part of the growing empire. The second theory was that they packed up and moved away to avoid conflict. Both theories sounded reasonable enough. But when scientists started analyzing DNA from Xaltocan, they uncovered evidence that suggests the reality was far more sinister. The genetic data revealed something that sent chills down researchers' spines. The DNA samples from before the Aztec conquest showed one clear genetic signature, the typical markers you'd expect from the Otomi population. But samples from after the conquest told a completely different story. The original Otomi genetic markers had virtually disappeared. In their place, researchers found DNA signatures that matched populations from hundreds of miles away. It was as if the entire original population had been replaced by completely different people. This wasn't a gradual change. This was a wholesale population replacement. The implications are staggering and deeply unsettling. This was just the beginning. As more DNA samples were analyzed from sites across central Mexico, a pattern began to emerge that would challenge everything we thought we knew. But if an entire people vanished, what took their place? Reshaping the land. Let me paint you a picture of what these DNA findings really mean. Imagine if a new power came to your hometown tomorrow and within a few years, genetic tests showed that everyone living there had completely different ancestry than the original inhabitants. That's essentially what the evidence suggests happened in Xaltocan and potentially dozens of other pre-Aztec cities. The University of Texas researchers who led this groundbreaking study didn't mince words. They discovered that the Aztec conquest didn't just change political boundaries or cultural practices, it fundamentally altered the genetic landscape of central Mexico in ways that were previously unimaginable. To put it mildly, this was a shock to the system. But here's what makes this discovery even more disturbing. The thing nobody tells you is that this pattern of genetic replacement wasn't limited to just one city. As more ancient DNA samples were analyzed from sites across the former Aztec Empire, similar patterns began to emerge. Original populations with distinct genetic signatures were systematically replaced by people with different ancestral backgrounds. The sheer scale of this genetic transformation suggests something that goes way beyond normal conquest. We're talking about what researchers are now calling demographic replacement, a fancy scientific term for what might have been one of the largest population displacements in pre-Columbian American history. Think about the logistics of this for a moment. To completely replace the genetic signature of an entire region requires moving massive numbers of people over vast distances. The Aztecs weren't just conquering territory, they were actively reshaping the demographic makeup of central Mexico. Some researchers have started using terms like genetic colonization to describe what they're seeing in the DNA data. This wasn't just military conquest. This was systematic population replacement on a scale that rivals some of the most dramatic demographic shifts in human history. As more evidence has come to light, researchers have started piecing together what might be one of the most systematic campaigns of population displacement ever recorded. The genetic data doesn't just show that original populations disappeared, it shows exactly what replaced them. And the pattern is chillingly consistent. Original inhabitants with distinct local genetic signatures were replaced by people carrying genetic markers from the Aztec heartland and their allied regions. This wasn't random. The evidence suggests a coordinated effort to reshape the population structure of conquered territories. But what happened to all those original inhabitants? Some may have been forcibly relocated. Others might have been absorbed into the Aztec military, scattered across the empire to prevent local resistance. However, there's a third possibility that the genetic evidence increasingly supports: the systematic elimination of local populations. The complete disappearance of certain genetic lineages from specific regions suggests demographic catastrophes that go far beyond what you'd expect. Recent studies of Y-chromosome diversity in Aztec descendant populations have revealed something particularly disturbing. Certain genetic lineages that should be present are completely missing. It's as if entire family lines simply vanished from the genetic record. This pattern isn't random. It's concentrated in regions that were key targets of Aztec expansion. The most shocking fact is that this massive project of social and genetic engineering was a core part of their imperial strategy. This raises a new question. Who were the Aztecs themselves? A people forged in fire. Now let's talk about one of the biggest plot twists in this genetic detective story. Remember how I mentioned that the Aztecs claimed to come from a mythical homeland called Aztlan? Well, DNA evidence is now suggesting that this wasn't just mythology. It might have been the key to understanding one of the largest population movements in pre-Columbian America. Recent genetic studies have identified something that has archaeologists absolutely buzzing: distinct Y-chromosome and mitochondrial DNA groups that can be traced across vast distances in the Americas, some stretching for thousands of miles. These genetic markers are like breadcrumbs that ancient populations left behind. What researchers discovered is that the genetic diversity among Aztec descendants is absolutely enormous, way more diverse than you'd expect from a single founding population. We're talking about a dizzying array of haplogroups, which are basically major branches on the human family tree. These aren't just random letters and numbers, they are genetic signatures that tell the story of multiple waves of migration and population mixing on a truly massive scale. The implications are staggering. This genetic diversity suggests that what we call the Aztecs weren't actually a single people at all. Instead, they appear to have been a complex coalition of different groups with varying genetic backgrounds who came together to form the Aztec Empire. You see, this is where it gets really interesting and more than a little disturbing. The genetic evidence suggests that these different groups didn't come together through peaceful alliance. Instead, the DNA patterns indicate rapid, large-scale population movements that coincided with the disappearance of original inhabitants from sites across central Mexico. Some geneticists are now theorizing that the Aztec expansion involved organized population transfers on a scale that's hard to comprehend. Imagine coordinating the movement of hundreds of thousands of people across hundreds of miles of challenging terrain. The logistical complexity alone would have required a level of organization and planning that rivals modern military operations. The mitochondrial DNA from sites like Tlatelolco revealed something that left scientists stunned. The genetic signatures showed clear connections to populations from much farther north than previously expected. We're talking about genetic markers that link Aztec populations to groups that lived hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles away in what is now the southwestern United States. This discovery has completely revolutionized our understanding of pre-Columbian population movements. The evidence suggests that the ancestors of the Aztecs undertook migrations of truly epic proportions. But the data also shows that these weren't gradual, peaceful movements. The DNA patterns suggest rapid, large-scale population shifts that happened over relatively short time frames. What many overlooked is that this wasn't a simple migration. It was more like an invasion by a diverse, multi-ethnic force, all united under one banner. The Aztecs weren't a single tribe, they were a meticulously engineered coalition, a human weapon designed for conquest and replacement. So what does this mean for the history we've been taught? Beyond the pyramids. The implications of these DNA discoveries go far beyond just updating textbooks. We're talking about fundamentally rethinking one of the most important civilizations in human history. For generations, the Aztec Empire has been portrayed as a relatively straightforward story of military conquest. The traditional narrative shows a skilled warrior people expanding their territory and creating a tribute-based empire. But the genetic evidence is forcing historians to confront a much more complex and troubling reality. The DNA doesn't support the idea of peaceful assimilation. Instead, it suggests systematic demographic engineering on a massive scale. Think about what this means for our understanding of pre-Columbian America. We've always known that the Aztecs were efficient conquerors, but the genetic evidence suggests they were also masters of population control. They weren't just building an empire, they were reshaping the human landscape of central Mexico. This revelation has sparked intense debates. Some argue that the evidence proves the Aztecs were even more sophisticated than previously believed, capable of executing population transfers that required incredible logistical planning. Others see the DNA findings as evidence of a much darker legacy. The systematic replacement of local populations suggests a level of demographic control that raises troubling questions. Recent studies have also begun to examine how these population changes affected cultural and linguistic diversity. The genetic replacement seems to have coincided with the disappearance of local languages, artistic traditions, and religious practices. Entire cultural legacies appear to have vanished along with their genetic signatures. The researchers who first identified these patterns have called for a complete reevaluation of Aztec imperial policy. Their findings suggest that what we've been calling conquest might be better described as demographic colonization. Many people watching this are probably wondering if all this happened overnight. If this is all true, are we missing a key detail? The thing is, this genetic revolution is forcing us to reconsider how powerful states have managed populations throughout history. The scale of the population changes suggests the Aztecs developed techniques for demographic control that were remarkably sophisticated. But there's a darker side. The evidence suggests they may have been pioneers in what we would now recognize as forced population transfer. These findings are forcing historians to rethink everything they thought they knew about the Spanish conquest. If the Aztecs had already displaced and absorbed entire populations before the Europeans arrived, that changes the whole story. It means the Spanish may have stepped into a land already fractured, with communities weakened or resettled by earlier Aztec campaigns. In some regions, the lack of fierce resistance might not have been due to fear of Spanish weapons, but to the lingering scars of Aztec expansion. Villages that had already been uprooted or repopulated might not have felt the same loyalty to their lands or to the rulers who now claimed them. This new perspective paints the Aztec Empire in a darker light. They weren't just conquerors building monuments and cities, they were social architects who reshaped entire populations to secure their power. Through war, forced migration, and assimilation, they rewrote the human geography of Mesoamerica long before Cortez set foot on its shores. The empire's grandeur hid a foundation of erased cultures and forgotten bloodlines. What the Spanish encountered wasn't a united civilization ready to defend itself, but an empire already built on instability and silence. The Aztecs didn't just conquer, they engineered the very disappearance of the people who came before them. The secrets locked in our DNA are rewriting history, revealing a past far darker than we imagined. What other historical truths have we gotten completely wrong? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more hidden history.